Three, two, one, action.
Well, let me tell you something, brother.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Wrestling in Film podcast. I guess this would be officially episode 8, as we've had a couple of detours with a few shorts, a few past interviews. So I hope you enjoyed those, but my apologies if you are looking forward to a fresh, new piece of content from yours truly. So here we go. And today we are celebrating The Rock's magnum opus, The Rock's premier, the highest point of his on screen, big screen career. We're talking about none other than the Tooth Fairy brother. um, well, whether you think that hits his magnum opus or not, debatable. I doubt you think that. I doubt anybody thinks that. I certainly don't think that. But I do feel that Tooth Fairy is a very unique and special point in The Rock's career, and something that doesn't get, in some ways, enough credit. As much credit as it deserves, should I say. So today I'm going to explore all those things on its 13-year anniversary, because 13 years ago today, the Tooth Fairy hit screens, hit the big screen, hit the theaters if you're in America, hit the cinemas if you're here in the UK. So yeah, I mean, the Tooth Fairy, for those of you who don't know, and shame on you who do not, Tooth Fairy is about a story. Is this story about a man named Derek Thompson, who is a minor league hockey player, and he's a dream killer because his own dreams of being a major hockey star have not come to fruition. He's in the minor leagues. He's messed up his shoulder. He's kind of moody, down in the dumps. So he is now kind of just living off this nickname and being a sideshow act in hockey of just beating up people and knocking their tooths out. And he's nicknamed, yes, the Tooth Fairy. But as his punishment for killing dreams and squashing children's hopes of achieving their wildest dreams of becoming hockey players or believing in the Tooth Fairy, etc., he is summoned and sentenced to duty, 1 week of duty as a Tooth Fairy, where he is forced to believe that this exists and dreams are important and it's important for children to believe. The concept of the Tooth Fairy, I will say, is it was a great one. I think it was a really strong concept. I recall very vividly, actually, when we watched the trailer that 13 years ago, or over 13 years ago, that the film had a lot of promise, because at that time we were well and truly, as purely as a Rock fan, he was an actor. He had been an actor by that point for nine or 10 years by that point, and he was away from the WWE, and he was the actor. And at that point, he had also established himself as a family-friendly entertainer, and a really good one. I'd seen the game plan. I'd seen Race to Witch Mount in the cinema. So I'd become accustomed to him doing these types of movies that actually entertaining me. So when this came out, I thought, oh, this was another one of those family entertainers. But the concept, the idea of it was actually really fun. And I felt like there was a lot of potential behind it. On top of that, we have a fantastic cast list. Like, I mean, you look back at the Tooth Fairy, it's really impressive. Direct. I have to look back here to see the director's name. It was Michael Lembeck who directed it, and he had such a wonderful cast. You had obviously The Rock leading it as Derek Thompson. You had Ashley Judd playing Carly Harris, who was Derek's girlfriend. Julie Andrews, Stephen Merchant, Billy Crystal, Seth MacFarlane has a cameo in there. Just yeah, list goes on. I mean, it's a fantastic cast and just, yeah, truly impressive. But unfortunately, as much as the excitement came when I watched the trailer, because I was like, oh, this is, even at that age, I was, goodness, I want to say 15 maybe at the time when I watched that trailer, The Tooth Fairy. And it was, yeah, I was really impressed. Even at that time, I could appreciate it. And I thought it was a really exciting move for The Rock's career. And I wasn't a macho, tough guy teenager who had to see The Rock in action films. No, I'm going to appreciate Rock's versatility in that regard. But unfortunately, it never really, the legacy of The Tooth Fairy is kind of a bit of a joke, because it didn't fully take advantage of the fun concept that it had. I think Michael Lembeck doesn't really take the movie in very you know new directions. It's quite formulaic in a lot of ways, and it just is very reliant upon The Rock and it's the supporting cast to basically take at times an average script to newer heights, and at times they succeed, but overall the impact of the film doesn't quite have what it potentially could have. And I think in a lot of ways the film is mocked and seen as a bit of a joke. I mean, it's very common occurrences. Even Stephen Merchant likes to, I don't know if Stephen Merchant hates the film, but he definitely indulges in kind of making light of it. I recall in the Fighting with My Family press tour, every time he talked about his and the Rock's relationship, they just his main joke was, like, oh, Tooth Fairy. We met on the Tooth Fairy, and oh, what a classic it was, and something along those lines. So, it's a bit of a joke there. Even when The Rock returned to WWE, John Cena used it as kind of an insult and a bit of a jab. He's in his rap, he was like, "Oh, you left to play a fairy with a tooth," or something along those lines. So yeah, it's viewed as a bit of a joke. Like, I think that's part of its legacy. Um, so it's not remembered with great reverence, but it was a huge hit. Like, or it was a hit for sure. I believe it has a budget of 48 million. It grossed, I believe, 112.5 million worldwide. So it was absolutely a hit. So I mean, from a career standpoint, it continued to take The Rock up and fully really establish himself as that family entertainer. Because at the time before that, if you don't remember, The Rock had very hit and miss moments with action films, so he had to change course, and he did with Game Plan, Get Smart, Race to Witch Mountain, and I think Tooth Fairy was like that final pinnacle of establishing, hey, I've cornered this market, and I can be a success. And it provided versatility and longevity to a career that otherwise wouldn't have had it, had he done that switch. And he did it successfully, because if we look at the past, Hulk Hogan tried, and God help us, none of us want to watch Santa Claus with muscles. Sorry, Hulk. But I know, just from a pure film standpoint, though, it's not viewed. I remember when I was a teenager, when I was in college, a lot of my peers who were also Rock fans couldn't acknowledge that, or accept the fact that I watched the Tooth Fairy and actually appreciate the Tooth Fairy, because, of course, The Rock wasn't being a tough guy, and it was uncool to do so. However, I totally disagree with that, because, like I said, I was excited about it when it was coming out, when the trailers released, and yes, it didn't fully live up to what it could have been, but I think there's so much to it, because first and foremost, when you watch it, I think not only is The Rock fantastic, and yes, he, in a lot of ways, he's playing his charismatic self, but he's so committed to the concept. Like, there is no ego attached to The Rock's performance. He can be vulnerable. He can be the butt of jokes without any hesitation. Most of the scenes that are probably the best or really funny are when Rock is the butt of jokes. And Rock is not afraid to look weak, to look like a fool. And that, to his credit, is why Rock is so successful, why Rock is so good, not only in movies in general, but also in this movie in particular. He's so giving as a performer, and that's very much like his wrestling career as well. If it's good for the entertainment value, if it serves the comedy, he will do it, and he's not afraid to tarnish whatever macho image you may have of him. And that comes across, I think, in any of his movies that he's done. I think over the last 20 years or so, that ability to look vulnerable and to give, I think, comes forth perhaps best in the Tooth Fairy, because from a visual standpoint, he's in this tutu, the pink tutu, the blue Tooth Fairy outfit. He's constantly jabbed and insulted, and his kind of macho character, who's this tough hockey player, it's actually mocked and put down a peg by things that are less tough, if we will. So that's brilliant on the Rock's end, and he's working with such talented actors as well, like Billy Crystal, Stephen Merchant, Julie Andrews, and he holds his own. He absolutely holds his own. Like, that is such an impressive thing about The Rock. And I think, again, from an acting standpoint, Rock is not given his due all the time, and sometimes, especially in the last 10 years or so, it's because it's quite formulaic. It's quite it's the same old. Whereas in Tooth Fairy, yes, it's this child-friendly entertainer. It has this generic aspect to it. Yet he really shows depth in his acting, specifically his comedic acting, his timing, like I said, his ability to be the butt of jokes and kind of be all in and go toe to toe with Billy Crystal, with Stephen Merchant, with Julie Andrews. He's never a step behind. And those actors are fantastic. Like Billy Crystal, phenomenal. Stephen Merchant, especially in the comedy realm, unbelievable. And Rock's right there with them. It just flows back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it's a joy to watch. And I think those moments, in particular, with those actors that I've said that Rock has, it's those moments that make this film a very fond memory and experience for me as a viewer, as a fan of The Rock, as a fan of films, and then lighthearted films, well, lighthearted entertainers. I think that that aspect really holds really holds a lot of weight for me, and is a reason why I'm able to enjoy Tooth Fairy. When I mentioned obviously those moments in Tooth Fairy with Billy Crystal, especially that scene with the scene with Billy Crystal and The Rock, where Rock has just been brought to Fairyland, and he's now all confused. He's geared up, and now he has to be stocked up with the weapons and the magic that he needs to do his job as a Tooth Fairy. He meets Billy Crystal, who is this very funky, very strange fairy who's distributing all these weapons and magic. And every moment, it's such a wonderful scene because Rock and Billy Crystal look like they're having the time of their life. And Billy Crystal's constantly, his character's Jerry is constantly just jabbing Derek, who's obviously The Rock, about his he's lying to kids, and every time he makes a fool of The Rock, where he keeps baiting Rock into believing something and he takes it away, believing something, he takes it away. It's a constant element of that scene. Like, for example, Billy Crystal was like, "Oh yeah, you like kids, but there is something you could do. There's a pill, a magic pill, and if you take this pill, this will all go away." And Rock's like, "Really?" He's like, "No." He's like, "Oh, but you believed, and I took it away. But be mad at me. I don't care." Yeah. Just moments like that are so fantastic. And like I said, Billy Crystal doesn't miss a beat, and Rock's right there with him every second of the way. Every scene with Stephen Merchant and The Rock in this film is brilliant. When they're not getting along and they're about to have a fight in Fairyland, Rock's trying to threaten him, and Stephen Merchant's like, when Rock says, "Oh, I'm gonna spin my fist around your face," and Stephen Merchant's like, "Oh, what's that?" And The Rock's like, "It's a threat." And Merchant says, "Well, it just looks like you're going to do this around my face." And for those of you Do not see it's spinning your fist in front of in front of my spinning in front of your face. So things like that, just small moments, but there's a lot of those moments. So even though the film as a whole doesn't quite hit, those moments are in quite a large dosage, actually. So, like I said, even though it doesn't all add up to making a great film and really taking us in a new direction, you can kind of guess what's going to happen every step of the way. Those emotional changes in the film, the twists, the plots for Rock to ultimately believe and be a successful Tooth Fairy and be magical. It's very formulaic. It's very easy. It happens very fast. So there's not a lot of depth to it. But the entertainment value behind the performances, that led sustained by the performances, my apologies. And I brought there is quite a few of those throughout the whole film. And that's what makes it. I don't think you go into a type of film like this and expect to see, as I was joking at the beginning, a magnum opus, a brilliant, high class storytelling. You just go in for a good time and for a laugh. And I think for its uh, audience, it works, and it clearly did because it was a hit. People went to see the film, and so many people who I talk to and who I'm friends with, who may be slightly younger than me, they watched it when they were young and had such fond memories. So I've had quite a few people say it was like their favorite movie when they were growing up. Like one of my best friends, it said it was her favorite film. Growing up, one of my little cousins says it was her favorite film when she first saw it. There's a lot of fondness to it, and you have to take your glasses of your stereotypical, the normal glasses you have of what you expect as a great film or great piece of entertainment, and sometimes you have to change gears to see what is this being aimed towards, and is it successful in accomplishing its goal of what it's trying to be. And in the Tooth Fairy's case, I think it absolutely is. It was a hit. Like I said, it brought the audience it needed, and from a large, I say a large, but the group of people that I asked when they watched it originally, when they were quite young, and they probably were the audience for Tooth Fairy, they loved it. And like I said, I can appreciate there is genuine entertaining moments for audiences of all ages. And I appreciate it then, and I can watch it now, and I can still just have a breezy hour, 40 minutes watching it and have fun, and I think that's in some respect a large part of what the legacy should be, is the fact that mission accomplished. It did what it needed to do. It served The Rock's career again as like just that final rubber stamp of yes, he can do this. Really, he can be a family entertainer and a really good leading man in this capacity. No problem. It was the rubber stamp of I can do this, and I can fit into what you want me to, Hollywood, even though I don't want to just do this. And like I said, it showed his depth of acting to hang with all these brilliant actors in a comedic realm without missing a beat. So there's actually so much to it, and so much of a showcase for how great The Rock was and is in the Tooth Fairy. And like I said, there's actually still great entertainment value in it, even though if it's not ultimately the biggest or greatest film you will ever see. What I will also say is though, this, like I said, it rubber stamped The Rock in this chapter of his career of being the children's entertainer, but it came at such a fascinating time because it was probably the last time, it was the last chapter of Rock's, just his kind of string of family entertainers before he then was like, okay, I've done what you want me to do, Hollywood. Like this was Tooth Fairy seemed to be like that final stamp of I've done what you want. Now it's me. Because at the end of 2010, he does Faster. And although Faster wasn't a success, it bombed, it wasn't appreciated as much as I think it should be, actually. It was like a solid action film. It was the beginning of the new mold of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in Hollywood. because after 2010, a year later, basically, yeah, a year and a month later, after Tooth Fairy released, The Rock returned to WWE as well. So he returned to wrestling where he was told not to. He returned to the action genre. He bulked up, and then he was guns blazing ahead. Fast and Furious, G.I. Joe, Snitch, more Fast and Furious movies. Hobbs and Shaw came along, Sand and Reyes, Jumanji, Central Intelligence. The list, the list goes on. Skyscraper, countless action movies, action movies, action movies, action movies, action comedies. Yes, you still had the odd children's entertainer. Moana comes to mind, but it's now steered by fun action films, and he's bulked up and he's stayed that size, and it's all him. It's all what he wants to be now, and now, but that all stemmed from Tooth Fairy almost being the final chapter, the transition film, if you will, because Tooth Fairy worked and it was successful, and it allowed him to be like, I've done this, and now I can go back to what I want to do, and almost not take a risk. I guess it could be considered a risk at that time because he was having success in this market in what Hollywood wanted him to do. But now he could go back and do what he wanted to do, and obviously he's done more than okay. But yeah, just from that standpoint as well, just like I said, the wrestling and film standpoint, it was really fascinating because it really is that last chapter of Rock being what Hollywood wanted him to be before finally going back to him being, as a wrestling fan, in a way, my Rock, being big, tough, but still funny, and being like more of what we saw in the ring, which in a lot of ways is wonderful. If not, at the time, I did kind of criticize The Rock a little bit for this in my recent article about his Black Adam failure, but about being kind of recycled and not being able to get away from that, which I guess Tooth Fairy in some respect did allow him to do and showcase more than some of his films now. However, him being in the position he is now, I think it's a wonderful thing for all involved, because if for nothing else, in a wrestling and film capacity, Tooth Fairy perhaps was what allowed Fighting with My Family to become what it has become. Because Fighting with My Family, if you don't know, is directed by Stephen Merchant, who obviously starred in this with The Rock. It's produced by The Rock. Rock also stars in the film, and is about the real life story of who was WWE superstar Paige and now AEW superstar Saraya. And it was her life journey, her life story, and her journey to becoming the champion in the WWE. And because obviously of The Rock's relationship that I believe was born in Tooth Fairy with Stephen Merchant, he saw the documentary on Paige's family, took that and wanted Stephen Merchant to direct it, which ultimately he did. And I believe Fighting with My Family, like I said, from a wrestling and film standpoint, is perhaps the biggest and greatest and most important piece of film there has ever been. The merging of professional wrestling, cinema is beautiful. It showcases wrestling in a positive light. It was really well received. It was funny. It was heartwarming. It was just the wrestling itself was so wonderfully done. And yeah, it was a love letter to professional wrestling, and something which had never been done and probably would never have been done had it not been for The Rock steering ahead, and also Rock having the power and the success that he's had. Had he not had that, and had he not gone back to being The Rock after, Tooth Fairy and being a slimmed down version of himself and doing what, like I said, what Hollywood wanted him to do, had he not then steered back into being a big, Rock being just truly himself, Fighting with My Family wouldn't have happened. So in so many ways, it's Tooth Fairy is the pinnacle and the catalyst, sorry, for Fighting with My Family. So if there's wrestling fans out there who dislike Tooth Fairy or hate on it, show your appreciation for Tooth Fairy, because perhaps without Tooth Fairy, perhaps without that being cementing The Rock's success in the family entertainment genre, and perhaps allowing him to then catapult back into being what he wanted to be, big, more masculine, tough guy, still entertaining, and obviously going back to wrestling, embracing The Rock, all that stuff, and then having the success, and then also developing a relationship with Stephen Merchant, to then ultimately all the way going back to creating Fighting with My Family, all the way going forward, sorry, to 2019 and creating Fighting with My Family. Had it not been for Tooth Fairy, we may not have got that. And had it not been for Fighting with My Family, we may not be seeing all this wrestling content that's going across Netflix, perhaps with Chris Hemsworth being Hulk Hogan, Dark Side Ring, so much content across the board, and not also purely negative content, positive spins of wrestling, or just straight down the line, honest perspectives of it. And all of that may not have been possible without Fighting with My Family, and Fighting with My Family may not have been possible without the Tooth Fairy. So its lasting legacy, its lasting impact is big. And now that you think about it, and now that I think about it, and I've reflected on it, it's really, really important. And I'm so much more appreciative of Tooth Fairy now than I've ever been, and I still love Tooth Fairy. It's I say it's my guilty pleasure, but I don't have a fear of saying to anybody I enjoy Tooth Fairy. And I think, like I said, there is so much to it on screen to enjoy, but even from a background standpoint and what it's ultimately led to with Fighting with My Family, I think Tooth Fairy has perhaps even a more special place in my heart, which I think a lot of you may not have thought going into this, that you may think about it slightly differently, that, oh, wow, Tooth Fairy might be quite important for wrestling fans, if no one else. So yeah, don't disrespect Tooth Fairy, folks. What I'd like to do now, though, and I think it's going to be quite a fun thing to reflect on with Tooth Fairy, is I've got people, peers of mine, friends of mine, family members, to just react to Tooth Fairy. I said, give me your thoughts, because I don't know everybody's thoughts on Tooth Fairy. And I was like, oh, I was curious. So I said, you give me what your impressions were of Tooth Fairy, what your impressions are of Tooth Fairy, and I'll read them and I will react to what they say. So here we go. Let's dive into this. It will be fun, I think. And some of these comments I haven't actually read, so we're going off the top. So I'm going to go for, let's go here. All right. So this is comment number 1. So I believe she was watching Tooth Fairy at the time of this comment. All I can think of when I see The Rock in Tooth Fairy is how tiny he was. Like, where's his muscles gone? I can't lie, that thought comes to my mind too. When I see Rock in Tooth Fairy, and obviously I've known Rock since, I've been a fan of him since the WWE, so he was big in WWE, then he shrinked, then he comes back up, obviously, to what, the ginormous man he is now. And it's not, I don't want to say frightening, but it's fascinating to watch. Like, when I watched Tooth Fairy again last night, and watching him, like, in that locker room scene where he's topless and talking to the young upstart hockey player, it's fascinating to see. Yes, he's in fantastic shape, but he's so small. And that was part and parcel of him being what Hollywood wanted him to be, was him shrinking down. And then eventually, obviously, after Tooth Fairy, he was like, that's it, no more. I'm going to be me. And he bulked back up. But yeah, I can't lie. I'm with her there. It's a fascinating sight, and quite funny to see tiny Rock. Oh, this is a bit of a longer one and more in-depth. But I found the movie to be a generic by-the-numbers kids movie, just something that would keep its target audience entertained, although with its concept, it could have been so much more with a better script and director at the helm. On the bright side, found Dwayne Johnson to be effortlessly charming, and remember being surprised that he held his own in several scenes with far more experienced comedic actors like Billy Crystal, Julie Andrews, and Stephen Merchant. He was ready for the big time, just needed better movie choices to get him there. And yeah, and some things that I mentioned earlier, and that are very much come to light here, and yeah, all 100%, I think, accurate. Obviously, I think, yeah, no one's going to say Tooth Fairy was a revolutionary movie, and I think with its concept, it could have been so much more. But Rock really brought his A game and showed what he can do. And I've often said he's this generation's Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I think movies like Tooth Fairy showcase how far superior he is as a talent, just from an acting standpoint and versatility standpoint, than Arnold Schwarzenegger and some movie stars gone by. His versatility is excellent. Tooth Fairy is a fun movie for the whole family to enjoy. DJ showed in his early days of acting that comedic roles are his ace in the hole. 1000%. Yeah. I think, like I said, he took his career in a different path, and yeah, he showed he could do it without any flaws, without any issues. His comedy was without a doubt his bag. I think this might be one of the last ones. Tooth Fairy was such a great film to watch as a family when it was released. I was a massive fan of wrestling, and The Rock was my favorite when I was a kid. So seeing him in this way was surprising and exciting. It's super silly and a great film to sit and watch as a family, especially with younger kids. As an adult, I appreciate it as a goofy, heartwarming film that brings a lot of nostalgia. I think that might be the best way to sum this podcast up. I thought as an adult, like I said, let's read that again. As an adult, I appreciate it as a goofy, heartwarming film that brings a lot of nostalgia. And I think that's exactly how I feel. Perhaps in my long-winded explanation, that's exactly what I think in some respect I feel today. Like, I can appreciate what it tried to be, and when I was younger, maybe I enjoyed it even more. But even today, I can appreciate it, and the great performances, like I said, bring it up. And yeah, it has a nostalgic place in my heart for sure. It's done so much. Like I said, there is so much more to Tooth Fairy. The impact it had, intentionally, unintentionally, to so many things around it that came after Tooth Fairy. Yeah, it's a really unique film in so many ways, actually. That you think about it, and you wouldn't think that looking back at Tooth Fairy. But it was a catalyst to a lot of things, and it was, like I said, it's actually a fun film. And if you can drop your machismo or just kind of very hard-nosed critical perspective of cinema, it's actually, yeah, it can be enjoyed and it can be fun. And there's so many moments that I could highlight to you that are just great scenes, great fun scenes, and especially because of the performances, and that's credit to The Rock, Stephen Merchant, Julie Andrews, etc. So yeah, if you haven't, I would suggest going back and celebrating Tooth Fairy's 13-year anniversary and watching it, enjoying it, if for nothing else, to see how far The Rock has come and how great he can be and is in these roles. Because if you're a fan of The Rock, you're a fan of wrestling, go watch it, man. And if you don't, it's obvious. Sorry, I got emotional there. It's obvious you can handle the tooth. And that's the whole tooth and nothing but the tooth. Thank you for listening to another edition of the Wrestling Film Podcast. I'm your host, Humza, saying I hope you've learned something about the magnum opus that was the Tooth Fairy and The Rock's movie career. Thanks so much. Please like, subscribe to the channel, share this video, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. And I'll see you again very, very soon. Brother.